Good evening, Facebook, Instagram. You all will get it on the replay, and YouTube and LinkedIn. You all will all get it on the replay. But good evening. It's September 15th, 2021. Welcome back to another meeting with Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I am Keisha Hamilton, your host. At a meeting of Diverse Minds, we explore racial equity from a historically authentic lens. I'm excited to engage with you again on this evening regarding that. So that means that the history and the perspectives that we share, they are formed from a historical perspective, meaning that I've done research and study, to help form my perspective. It also guides my responses to different issues, and it frames the examples that I give you. History does that. Historically authentic information, is how we, choose to engage with you. Again, and also rather, the history of Black and Brown and Indigenous folks, people of color, those are the voices that we rely on a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. That's the group of people we like to tell the stories and the perspective from those whose stories usually aren't told. Usually the conqueror tells the story. And oftentimes in the telling of the story, when it comes from the conqueror's perspective, it's not going to always be very honest or truthful, which is what we have here in America. So the perspective that you're getting on a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton and the information that I share, it again comes from Black and Brown and Indigenous folks and other people of color groups. We rely heavily on this show on Black experiences, one, because I'm a Black woman, and so I have a plethora of experiences as a Black woman living in America that relate to historical instances that occurred throughout history that are still happening today to Black and Brown individuals. Not only our voice, but there's a heavy focus on Black voices, primarily because I'm a Black woman. So just so you know, that is where it comes from, a lot of it. This show is an extension of Diverse Minds Consulting, LLC. So you can actually look that up on, you can Google it. It's a website, www.diversemindsconsulting.com, diversemindsconsulting.com. This show is an extension of that organization. At that organization, we do consultations, we do one-on-ones, we do whole group trainings, we do cohort studies and book studies for churches, people, organizations, businesses that are trying to become more racially equitable in their practices, their policies, their procedures, who are trying to understand, social issues that are occurring and who are trying to respond from that racial equity lens. We offer a lot of those things at at Diverse Minds Consulting. Again, a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton is our free service. It's our, the service that we provide freely to the community, primarily because while a meeting of Diverse Minds, is set up as a for-profit organization, we recognize at Diverse Minds Consulting that the information that we share on a meeting of Diverse Minds is so important. It's so necessary. It's so important to have, these authentic conversations where individuals can come and kind of have a casual conversation should they want to in the chat, in the comment section, that we need to share this information, that we need to have this type of show, this type of platform available to people. So we do offer this as a free show. You can, this show, just so you know, this show serves two purposes. One purpose is we want Black and Brown and Indigenous folks to have a place where they can find affirmation and confirmation and safety in, exploring these topics as well, because, quiet as it's not kept, a lot of Black and Brown individuals, because society intentionally has kept a lot of information from us, we don't know a lot of our history. We don't connect all the dots all the time. And because we just a lot of times are simply surviving, we don't have time to dive into, these issues that are heavily impacting our lives because we're too busy just trying to survive. So this is a space for Black and Brown individuals to come and get the knowledge as well that they need so that they can understand what they're experiencing and so that they can fight against those things. And secondly, it's also a place for white individuals or white, people who identify as white, or who have lived in a culture of whiteness and, you know, other people identify, you know, or consider you to be white. People who would be considered, you know, coming from Europe or places like that, where more, you know, the lighter skin, the lighter eyes, the thinner hair, the you know, finer hair textured individuals, those type of people, it's also for them as well, or you as well, so that you can come to a space of safety as well. It's safe here. It's also courageous. It is historically authentic. So you're not going to get something that's going to make you feel good per se, but it will be truth, given in a way where you can receive it if you want to, and where you can ask questions, because a lot of times clarifying questions can be very helpful to understanding terms and concepts and phenomena and just ideologies. It's free and it'll help you on your journey to racial justice, racial equity here in, well, actually wherever you are. You know, we talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism. Again, it's historically authentic racial equity engagement, and those terms, those things will appear often in our conversations. So before we start, and actually tonight is going to be a night of a lot of terminology and definition. Trust me, we've done this before, and it was actually one of my most popular shows when I did this before. A lot of people were very grateful for having these terms kind of listed, defined, and then explained with a, you know, example to better understand it. So this is going to be another show like that, because again, like I said, it was very popular before, but because of that, you know, getting on the same, with terminology, getting on the same page is necessary for just kind of understanding what we're experiencing. You know, sometimes you can have an experience, you know, that you had something occurred, but naming it can be difficult. And then that naming it, being unable to do that, keeps that experience just kind of floating somewhere, as opposed to putting a name on that experience. And then having other people who've also, you know, experienced it and been able to name it, been able to confirm and affirm and say, yes, I had the same experience, and this is how I dealt with it, and this is how it played out. It's very, just as human beings, we, you know, we as human beings, we appreciate, you know, when someone else can, you know, say, I had the same experience. It helps us to feel like, okay, so maybe I'm not crazy. You know what I mean? Anyways, so let's get right to our definitions. So again, as I mentioned, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism on here. We're going to start with those terms, and then we'll jump into the other terms. Again, like I said, this was one of our most popular episodes some time ago. I think I did it probably about maybe 8 or 9 months ago when we did the first one. These are going to be different terms, but it'll be a lot of terms tonight. So just stay tuned, and, you know, maybe get your pen and paper if you want to, you know, copy them down, or you can just watch it later, because it's going to be, you know, it'll be up for a while. So what is diversity, equity, inclusion? I'll say DEI often on here. Diversity is the DE, is the equity, and I is the inclusion. Diversity is simply our difference. It not only includes, you know, your physical appearance, you know, that people can readily recognize. It is more related to, on this show, we like to think more about the diversity of your thoughts, your value systems that are different, and you know, why you make decisions that you make that are all different. You know what I mean? So that's the diversity that we like to acknowledge on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton. That's diversity. So what is equity? Equity is simply, I like to define equity where it's, you know, not, we talk about what it's not. So equity is not, I'm trying to fix stuff over here as well. Equity is not equality, okay? So people oftentimes mix up equity and equality. You know, they want equity to be equality, and it's just not. Equity is not fair, whereas equality does seek to be fair. So equality is where you have, you know, let's say a cake of some sort, and, you know, you have, you know, those of you who bake or cook, you know, you might oftentimes cut your cakes in 6 slices. So you get your 1, 2, 3 cuts, three slices in a cake, and it results in 6 pieces of pie, right? Or cake or whatever, you know, but it's those circular ones, you know. Anyways, though, fairness and equality, because that's what equality is. It's seeking to be fair. Equality seeks to be fair. So in being fair to 6 people, you have 6 pieces of pie. Each person gets a piece of pie. That would be equal. Everybody got the same amount, right? That's fair. Equity would say in that same situation that, you know, 4 of these people already have a pie in their hand. So we're not going to give them any pie, and we're going to give the two individuals who have no pie equal portions of the pie. We're going to give each of them three slices each. Or they'll say, this person actually needs 4 pieces because they have a little one with them and they're going to share it with them. And this person doesn't have, anyone with them. So I'm going to just give them 2 pieces. We've been equitable in that sense, right? We've given each person what they need in that sense. Now, clearly, we could argue over how needy a person might be for pie, but, hopefully you can get the message in that example, regardless to whether they needed the pie or not. In that instance, when we talk about pie, we talk about sweets and, everything should be done in moderation, right? But anyways, though, so, that's the idea between around equity and equality. Equity is not fair. Equity is personalized. Equity is giving each individual person and or group of people what they personally need to succeed. You have to know the barriers that have been in place to be able to acknowledge the need. If you don't know the barriers that a person or a group of people have experienced and or are yet experiencing, you won't understand their need. And you won't supply their need because you won't understand it. You'll feel like, nope, you can't have more than this person or that person, because that's not fair. Because again, in our society, we're always trying to be equal as opposed to equitable. And we are, shifting to the equity response because again, not everybody needs the same thing. And in equality, we waste resources, right? We're giving individuals things that they don't need, and over giving them. So they're having an abundance of stuff that they don't need. And individuals who need the more, we're giving them not enough. And so they're never able to catch up and never able to get ahead. They're never even able to, they're always living in a state of survival, of just trying to survive. Okay. So equity is not fair. It's personalized. You have to know the barriers that exist. And there, we can have a long conversation on that, and we're not going to do it again right now, but you can go back and watch some of the other videos on what equity is and how we dive into that. But without equity, anything you're doing in your organizations, your churches, your home, your relationships, your relationships. I'm a mom, I have 6 children. I cannot give each of my children the same thing and think that they're going to be satisfied. I have to personalize my response to all 6 of my children in order to ensure that their needs are being met. And that's the same thing we have to do in any relationship. So again, your churches, your organizations, your businesses, your relationships, your homes, if you're not giving equitable responses, if you're just trying to be equal with everything, then you're not meeting somebody's need, trust me. And somebody else is being over-resourced, and other people are suffering. Equity is everything. Equity is your everything. Remember that when you're doing your stuff, when you're creating your DEI programs, when you're trying to choose a diverse, a chief equity officer or diversity, and inclusion person, remember that equity is everything to the success of any of those initiatives. What is inclusion? Inclusion is simply having a seat at the table and ensuring that you're not only at the table, but that you have a voice in everything that's being created, and not only a voice, but that what you voice, what you put out there, it's incorporated or included or it's woven into the creation. Sometimes that means you have to take what you have, and a lot of times we're doing this a lot right now, and it's not good, but we've got to, we have to go through these processes of learning, right? Even though a lot of this is historical, and the only reason why we're still learning this is because individuals won't listen. But anyways, though, a lot of what we have individuals who are looking at their policies, their practices, and they're saying, okay, how can we incorporate your ideas into this? How can we bring in diversity, a diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of situations, and make what we have, more complete, where it's bringing in all those thought processes. I've given before the example of, myself being a mom of 6, America created a lot of its policies for the 2-parent home with 2 children. That's the, whatever American dream, 2-parent home, 2 children. And so our policies are created around that. Our PTO policies, our sick time policies. We expect that, for a mom and a dad, or, husband and wife, situation who have 2 children, between the 2 of them working in corporate America or just in any type of space where they offer, sick time, that between the two of them and their two kids, they have enough sick time. Let's say they give them, you know, I don't know, let's say 40 hours a year or something like that between the two of them. I'm sorry, 40 hours for each, so 80 hours between the two of them a year. And that might be a stretch. But if they do, whatever amount they give them, they expect that between those two parents and those two kids, they have enough time. They've calculated, and generally speaking, white individuals or any individuals who fit that description, two-parent home, each of you, you know, getting the same amount of time, usually you have enough PTO time to take care of your kids, take your vacation, whatever, between the two of you have enough. Well, when you have people like myself who come from communities who value big families, who value children as far as the number of them, you know, who just like big families, and you have and in my case, you have a woman who's single because I'm divorced. You have a woman who's single with 6 children, and she's trying to fit into this narrative where two people, you know, with 2 kids, they have enough sick time, as opposed to a woman like myself who's single and has 6 children trying to fit into there. You can imagine that oftentimes I didn't fit. I was taking too much time, according to some. You know, you're taking too much time off from work to take care of your kids. Now, mind you, had I had a spouse and only 2 children, I would have had enough time. But because our policies are created in a way that it fits one group of people, people like me who don't fit into there, and there are hundreds and thousands and millions of us, we always, you know, bust the system. We always mess it up. We always are a problem to the system, as opposed to an inclusive system and an equitable system that would say 2-parent home, 2 kids, we're giving you this amount because generally that has been enough. Single home, 6 children, we're going to give you double the amount or triple the amount of time needed in your PTO and sick time. Again, we're talking equitable, which is not fair. We're talking about inclusive, which includes the value systems of those that are different than the dominant culture, which would be Black and brown individuals who value bigger families. And we're talking about making sure that our responses include all and represent all. So we'd say we're going to give you more time to take off because you have more children. That would be equitable and inclusive. And a lot of times, because we're trying to create, or we're trying to adjust and amend our current policies to fit those models, and we are missing certain pieces, diversity, equity, and or inclusion in our thought processes of that, we find that we're always not making it. We can't figure it out. We're in boardrooms for hours at a time, just talking about how this is just not going to work. And you're right, because a lot of our policies and procedures and practices need to be burned and recreated with all those people around the table and with these terminologies, these definitions, these experiences in mind as we create, which is why we have these conversations. But yes, so that would be inclusion, ensuring that whatever is being created, that it acknowledges all the difference, all the diversity of thought, the diverse values, the barriers, equitable, acknowledging the barriers, acknowledging the personalization that's needed, and then creating whatever you're going to create with all of that in mind. That's real inclusion. That's real inclusion, and we don't often have that. Okay, what is racism? Racism is the marginalization and oppression of people of color based on socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. So it's basically a social construction. So somebody somewhere in some room decided that, we need to categorize, different groups of people. And the reason why we want to do that is we want to have an easy way to identify those who we consider to be less than, those who should be property, those who should not get paid the same amount, those who should be our workers. We're going to have an easy way to do that, an easy categorization of that. And we can do it off of the fact that they're dark and we're light. Okay. And so that's what racism is. That's what happened and how it was created. It privileges white people and it disadvantages, everybody that's not white or white passing. Okay. Racism also, and this is the part that makes it different than prejudice, because they're very similar up until they're not. And they're not similar. They break off at the point of power. So racism is coupled with power. So it's this marginalization and oppression of Black and brown people of color individuals, based on a hierarchy or a categorization coupled with power. Okay. And the power is in the legislation. The power is in, our laws that have been written to say, white only, colored only. And I know we don't have those laws right now, but we still do have segregation in different ways. You see your white flight and you see your red line organizations where we're going to charge more, or we won't rent to these people. It's in the power structure behind it. That's racism. Again, it's similar to prejudice, but it's not prejudice, okay? Because anybody can be prejudiced. Anybody can have a prejudging bias against someone else. That's usually negative, but can be positive. But not everybody can do anything about that prejudgment on a wide scale, right? You just can't do it on a wide scale. And so that's why Black and brown individuals cannot be prejudiced, because they cannot, they have no power structure behind them. They're the ones who are underneath that racism. I am on a call. Okay. Anti-racism is, sorry if my son is coming in from school, it's going to be like that a little bit during the school year. So anti-racism is actively and intentionally working to dismantle and oppose racism. So you got to know what racism is in order to actively fight against it, right? Okay, so we're going to get right into the other terms for tonight. Remember, tonight there's going to be a lot of terminology tonight. So what is privilege? It's a term that comes up often. We have had a show on it, and you can go back and look at that when it gives a little bit more than I'm going to give tonight. But privilege is, it's an advantage that is completely out of your control, okay? That's what privilege is. Privilege is something that you have that you had no control over. You didn't contribute to creating it. You didn't contribute to its presence being in your life. And so the easiest way to think of that would be like the advantage that a child may have from a two-parent home. So no child can determine who its parents are going to be prior to being born, or at any other time for that matter. So no person can determine its parents, right? So a child being born into a two-parent home, a two-parent stable home, is privileged by having that two-parent stable home, okay? Because not everybody has it, right? It's an advantage that they have. An advantage, if you have an advantage, then clearly there has to be disadvantages. So the advantage is that you come from a stable home, as opposed to a lot of children who come from single homes. And sometimes those single homes are not very stable, or they have a two-parent home, and that two-parent home is also not very stable. So that's why I wanted to put in there kids who come from a two-parent stable home. Then you have, let's consider another advantage, an advantage that could be a child having role model adults in their life, role models that pour into them. Not every child has a person who's pouring into them. Not every child has a person they can look up to. Hundreds and thousands and millions of our children don't have individuals who they can look up to. It's a privilege when you have that, and you actually have no control over that advantage if you have it. Okay, you didn't, likely you had parents who said, hey, look, I want you to, or a teacher who noticed that you needed some, or a coach who said, you just didn't have control over that. Go ahead. And then you have, for example, another advantage. This advantage could be having direct and or influential family members. So these family members could be politicians, musicians, artists, creatives, who, because of their adjacency to you, they show you the way. So we can think of our celebrities. I think of Serena Williams, or is her name Serena Williams? I forgot her last name. How could I forget Serena, our tennis player, our famous one? We love her. Anyways, so think of Serena, the tennis star and athlete and phenomenon. Her daughter had no control over the fact that she will be born to, one of the most talented and skilled tennis players in the world. Nor did she have control over the fact that she would begin training at the age of 3 or 4 with that famous and talented mother that she has. She has no control over that. It's a privilege that she has. Or we can think of our singers, think of singers who have children, actors and actresses who have children, or anybody who's famous, it's kind of easy to think of them, or even politicians. who had parents who were politicians, or who had, aunts or uncles who were politicians, to kind of show them the way and introduce them to different crowds of people. Those are privileges that individuals have that they have absolutely no control over. Okay, that's privilege. Okay, what is white privilege? Okay, because you're going to hear that a lot in diversity, equity, inclusion spaces, and even just now as this, our world is in the midst of another shift. So white privilege is it's a right. It's also an advantage, and it's an immunity that has been granted and is only available to whiteness. Okay, so quickly we're going to define whiteness and then come back to white privilege so that you can know what whiteness is, because this is only available to whiteness. Okay, what is whiteness? Okay, whiteness is not simply your skin tone. It's also your hair texture. It's your eye color. It's your ability to pass or to appear white. Okay, that's whiteness. It's also the culture of white. Okay, so you got to think about, as a white person, what culture do you, and so defining culture, let's define culture real quick, because that might be helpful as well in how you're thinking. So culture is defined as the customs, the arts, the social institutions, the achievements of a particular nation, people, or a social group. So think of, think of, you're going to church on Sunday morning. What does your church services look like? Generally in white communities, what do they look like? That's the culture. And you know what I mean? What does your holiday celebrations generally look like? That's the culture. And you're seeing and experiencing white culture every single day of your life. Anytime you're reading a book, that if you're not intentional about choosing a Black or brown author, anytime you're watching a TV show or a movie, if you're not intentional about ensuring that Black and brown people are present in the show, you're watching white culture. Okay, so white culture is everywhere around us. It's the norm. It's what you consider norm. Okay, it's what you consider norm in child raising. It's what you consider norm in, people walking through the store, or, buying groceries and the things that they buy. It's whatever you consider as norm. That's norm, as in normal. That's white culture. Okay, whiteness is it's a lot of things. Okay, all cultures have a lot of things that that are identified with that group of people. So it's believing that white ideas and individuals who have those ideas, they should be heard, and that their ideas should be progressed. Okay, whiteness believes that it has the best ideas. It believes that it has the best answers. It believes that it has all these things without consulting with anyone else. It believes that it has, it just has the answers. Okay, that's white culture. It's the idea that white men are the most qualified at any time and in any space. White culture actually believes, that white men, and then after that, white women, would be the most qualified in any space. That shouldn't be a surprise when we consider our organizations, our businesses, our churches, our, homes. A lot of times, it's this idea that white men specifically, are just qualified, period, And it's the culture of giving the benefit of the doubt to other white people, which could lead to harm of other people. It's this idea that, white people should be given a benefit of the doubt, period. Automatically the first thought would be they're innocent, as opposed to white culture also believing that, anyone who's not white should not be given the benefit of the doubt. This is this idea that, Black and brown individuals can be stopped, specifically Black men, but again, brown as well, but Black men can be stopped anywhere they are, and said that you fit the description, and the description looks absolutely nothing like them. Or we heard something on the scanner that said there was suspicious activity going on, and so we think that you're probably the suspicious activity. That's white culture. Okay. So every white person, no matter what you have, no matter who you are or what you have, no matter your socioeconomic status, you have white privilege. Okay. Remember, we had to define the culture so that we can know what whiteness is. Whiteness is the culture. Okay. Back to that white privilege. White privilege, again, is a right, advantage, or an immunity granted, and is only available to whiteness. Okay. Whiteness. So whiteness also encompasses individuals who are willing to operate in the norms of whiteness. Okay. Individuals who are willing to embrace whiteness as their guiding and their value system. That's also, a part of whiteness. okay? Because whiteness can be individuals who are not white as well, okay? It's not only related to just, individuals who are presenting white. You have Black and brown folks who will, embrace the culture of whiteness, and white individuals who will support them because of that embracing of their culture. But again, every white person, regardless of your socioeconomic status, that means regardless of how much money you make, you have white privilege. Everybody, every white person, regardless to how much money you make, has white privilege, okay? So what is white privilege? We're back to that now. It looks like going into any space and seeing yourself represented. You go into the school and the principal, the superintendent, the school board, the teachers, the staff, the kitchen, kitchen cooks and people who work in the kitchen and the janitors, they're still going to have white people there. The bus drivers, the gas station that you go to, like everywhere, the clerks, they ring your food up, the grocery clerks, they ring your groceries up, and the restaurant people who own restaurants and who work in restaurants, who cook in restaurants. It's this idea, white privilege is seeing yourself everywhere. Okay, almost every TV show, your doctors, your lawyers, they're all white. You're the people who clean your teeth, your dentists, your ophthalmologists, I think that's the right word for the people who check your eyes. Everybody that you see, that privilege is in, seeing yourself everywhere. That's white privilege. That's also white privilege, okay? It's having history written from a perspective that uplifts you, and that gives you pride in yourself and in your ancestors. History, again, is written from the perspective of the conqueror. Oftentimes, as I said, it is a lot of lies in history, a lot of omission in history, and a lot of slants, and just a lot of lies really in history. But it does still give you pride because it's written in a way where you can be proud of yourself in that history, okay? And white privilege, it plays out in your life unintentionally. You're doing absolutely nothing and you're going to be privileged. You again, when you're white, unless you are intentional about disrupting and interrupting what's occurring, like you don't want to see, you want to see some Black and brown individuals on a TV show, then you're going to have to go and find Black and brown TV shows that have Black and brown individuals portrayed positively. You have to do that. You have to be intentional about this. So if you don't do anything to fix, to change, to look for, to see something different, if you do nothing, so these people who say that, we're allies, but we're burying our heads in the sand, we don't want to see or know anything, then you're contributing to the continuation of white supremacy. And we're going to get to that term soon. You're continuing to, you're helping that. You have to be intentional about disrupting it. If you're not intentional about disrupting it, it's going to just continue on. It's the norm because it's the norm. That's why it just continues. That's why it continues, because it is the norm, okay? So let's go on to allyship and performative allyship and virtue signaling, because these are kind of similar. So what is allyship? Performative and virtue signaling, those are the ones that are similar. Allyship is this process of building relationships with individuals from marginalized communities and educating yourself, kind of staying in that space of education and kind of being adjacent to, shoulders to shoulder with, people who are in marginalized community. That's allyship. It's this idea that on occasion you might put a post up, that also goes to virtue signaling as well. You'll put a post up on your social media pages, or you might put a sign in your yard, that says that you support ... You may say you're voting for candidates who, are marginalized, come from marginalized communities. That's allyship. It's a good thing to be. It's the beginning, so it has to happen. Everybody has to go through allyship, right? You got to go through that education and that learning phase. Performative allyship is where allyship it stops right there. And in the performativeness of allyship, when it becomes performative, you're simply doing all these things that look good to people in marginalized communities, and yet you're still perpetrating harm in your personal life and in your personal decisions when they don't know about it, when they can't see it. You're still perpetrating those harms, okay? So allyship is not a deep dive into who you are and this commitment to changing your values and changing, this system that you have been, that has been embedded in your mind and your heart. It's not, it's not deep. It's kind of surface level. That's what allyship is. It's surface level. It like I said, everybody has to do it to get to, an accomplice. But most people stop at allyship, and it becomes performative because, again, when your Black and brown individual friends are not around, you are perpetuating, white supremacist harms. You're perpetuating those harms, okay? Whether in your voting, in those conversations in those back rooms, in your decision making as a legislator, sometimes right out front, and then saying, oh, I just didn't know any better, and then saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'll fix it next time. That whole idea that you can keep on, perpetuating these harms and thinking that I can just wipe my mouth and say sorry and keep it going, and yet those harms are still created by your actions. But you think, well, because I said sorry and because I'm still going to these, book reading groups or still attending these talks, that I'm okay. You're not okay. And the Black and brown individuals around you recognize that it's performative, and at best. Virtue signaling, like I said, is basically the same thing as that performative allyship. Is this idea that, let me say the right thing so that I can appear to be a certain way. For some reason, the culture of whiteness as well, it doesn't like being called out. It doesn't like being addressed. It doesn't like being the mirror being flipped on it and saying, this is who you are. This is what your actions are doing. And if you want me to believe that there's something else about you, then you have to change this image that I see in here. And this image is related to your decisions, your actions, your motives, and because of what happens as a result of your actions and your behavior and how you continue to do it, and the same results continue to play themselves out, you've got to change that image if you want me to believe something different about you. For some reason, the culture of whiteness does not like mirrors turned onto itself so it can see itself. What is white supremacy? Because we've talked about that. I've said that term and I want to define that. White supremacy is just the belief that white people, it's the belief, okay? This is, it's just a belief, people. It's not true. It's the belief that white people are superior and should dominate society. It's the belief that the white way is the right way, okay? It's this belief that, okay, it's not true at all, okay? Because all humans are superior, we all are, as far as, in our ability to be and create and do. And that's just evident throughout history. No one race is higher or better than another, period. But white supremacy would have you believe that whiteness is superior and that everybody else is inferior. It would have you believe that when a white person walks in a room, that's the voice that we should be hearing. It would have that white person believe that when they come into a space, any space, that they belong, any space that they are the most qualified to answer questions and to present ideas and etc. That's what white supremacy does. It's this belief that, that whiteness is better, the white way is better. White supremacy as well. So just for example, some examples of white supremacy is the transatlantic slave trade. We're going to rush through these real quick because I have to get off here soon, which is the capture and transport, sale, and enslavement of Africans by Europeans. That was, more than 400 years ago that was occurring. It's white supremacy is black codes. Those of you who've been on here, we've studied this a little bit before. Black codes is the prerequisite. It's the prerequisite to Jim Crow laws. Black codes were designed to limit the freedom of African Americans right around, right after the, I done forgot the time. Sorry, people. It wasn't the revolution. Hold on, let me see. It was right around the civil rights. Was around the civil rights? Hold on, I done forgot. Sorry, people. Jim Crow laws. When was it? Around the Emancipation Proclamation. So after the Emancipation Proclamation, I done forgot the term, people. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna remember it. And I'm gonna put it in here later. But I forgot the term. It's not Reconstruction. It might be Reconstruction. That's the term I'm looking for. I think the Reconstruction era. I think I done forgot the term. I'm so sorry that I forgot. But anyways, so black codes were created during that time to limit the movement of black and brown people. Right after the Emancipation Proclamation, white individuals, especially and specifically in the South, didn't like the fact that these black people who had previously been slaves were now free and now were given supposedly the same freedoms as them, the same agency to move about as them. And so they created these black codes to restrict them. Said, you can't be in these different places at this different time. You can't be walking around without paperwork, just all these different things. Again, the prerequisites to Jim Crow laws, Jim Crow laws were the legalization of racial segregation. So Jim Crow said, you can stand here, but you can't stand here. You can walk here, but you can't walk there. You can go in that room, but you can't go in this one. That was the legalization of racial segregation. Again, black codes were the prerequisite to that. And again, that's white supremacy. White supremacy is this idea that I belong in this space and you don't. You know, I can sit in the front of the bus and you have to sit in the back because I'm better than by just my skin tone. Okay. White supremacy is the assimilation. It's the requirement that in order to be accepted into white society, you Black and brown individuals have to look and or act like us. Look as in, you know, straighten your hair, you know, make sure you're, you know, as women, you thin as ever, you know what I mean? Talk like us, you know, use the same dialogue and the same dialect and, you know, just this whole idea that you need to look more like us, you know, in order to be accepted into white society, you know, in order to be rewarded in white society with jobs, with recognition, with, you know, with safety, with some measure of safety, because it's never really safe. That's assimilation, okay? This idea that you got to come to me, that white supremacists, we're better and you need to be like us. It's when they took our, you know, our indigenous children, when they came over here from Europe, and they took our indigenous children, took them to these white schools and said, you need to learn how to be like us because you're barbaric and we're not. That's white supremacy. That's assimilation. You understand? We talked about segregation a little bit in Jim Crow, but white supremacy is segregation. It's this idea that I'm better than you. I need to be over here and you need to be over there. I need the best of the best and you don't need you don't need anything good because you're not worthy of that. That's white supremacy. White supremacy is also violence. This is willingness to do whatever, say whatever, be whatever, do whatever in order to remain in a position of authority over any and everybody else, and any and everybody else who's not white. Okay, it's violence. White supremacy, lastly, is domination. It's this idea that I can control you as a white person. I can control you and everybody like you. Okay, I dominate you. I control you. I set the stage. I tell everybody what things are what's happening. Just think of control. That's white supremacy. All right, we're going to go on to a couple more and then I'm going to be ending here. Colonization. We have talked about colonization, not a lot as far as in defining it. So I want to define it tonight. Colonization, we talked about, I've said that term a lot of times. So I did want to give you, like I said, the definition for that. So colonization is the action or process of setting among or establishing control over indigenous areas, indigenous people who were, you know, in this area. In this case, you know, Europeans, when they came to the Americas, to North America, they, and actually, you know, much of the Americas, as you study world history, you'll find that this was happening in other places as well. Europeans going into these spaces and colonizing them, okay? It's this idea that, you know, I want this area for my own use. And so I'm taking it from you and I'm claiming it as my own, you know, manifest destiny type, you know, lies. Anyway, so that's what colonization is. It's this idea that I'm going into the space, taking it for my own, regardless of whose it is, and then I'm going to make it look like me. I'm going to make it assimilate. I'm going to dominate it. I'm going to create Jim Crow and Black Code laws. I'm going to create segregation, and I'm going to do all this through violence. Okay, that's, you know, colonization as well. Decolonization. So decolonization is the active resistance against colonization. It's saying I don't want any more parts of that. This looks like, what does it look like to be decolonizing or to be decolonized or to, you know, to embrace decolonization? It looks like the critical thoughts surrounding everything you do, every value you hold, every decision you make, and an acknowledgement of those harms that are caused by colonization, and then, you know, fixing those things. You've got to think critically about everything. We have been living under colonized domination for more than 400 years. So it would seem practical to recognize that almost everything we do, the way we, you know, just everything we do, every value we hold would have to be critically examined, because everything that we have comes from that perspective, a colonized dominant perspective. So, you know, marriage and its institution, the way we raise our children, the way we educate our children, you know, especially education, this idea that, you know, I tell you and you just accept that and not critically ask me any questions or bring in any of who you are and the experiences you had to, you know, make the conversation richer and deeper and more, you know, full to actually understand how the world is working. This idea that I wrote this in a book, you read it, you accept it, there you go. That's not education. But because we're not decolonizing our minds, because we're not critically thinking about everything that we're doing, we can't acknowledge that this is the space that we're in, that we're still in, that we're still operating through colonization. And we look at other people, because colonization is the norm, we look at people who are not fitting into the norm as if something's wrong with them, not recognizing that even thinking about somebody who's operating differently than you as if something's wrong with them is colonization operating within you. Okay, so last one that we're gonna talk about, and I gotta go. Collateral damage. It's this injury inflicted on something other than an intended target. This one is close to my heart. Collateral damage. It's the idea that injury is inflicted on something or someone, and they weren't the intended target. Okay, they weren't the intended target. Okay, that's at the very basic definition of collateral damage. How does this look? This looks like 34% of Black children living in poverty in 2019. So 34% of the Black children in America, 34% of the Black children in America in 2019 were living in poverty, as opposed to, or in comparison to, 10 or 11% of white children. This also looks like 28% of Latino children living in poverty in 2019 in America. That's collateral damage, again, in comparison to white children who are 10 or 11% at that time. That's what collateral damage looks like. All these children living in poverty. Because why are they living in poverty? What are some of the what's the kind of like the train that went, or what's the steps that led to this space where all these children are living in poverty? And that's not what we intended when we set up our nation. I mean, we didn't intend that, all these children live in poverty, you know what I mean? So this comes from low wages being paid to Black and brown overpopulated essential workers. Black and brown individuals overpopulate, they're overrepresented in service essential worker categories. There are grocery store clerks, there are janitorial help, there are, just our service spaces. You understand? Because a lot of times, and let's go to the next point about that. This comes from refusing to hire and or promote Black and brown employees, despite how they may be over or better qualified. Their skills may be better, their educational levels may be better, their talent likely a lot of times is better. But because we refuse to promote them, then their children, 34% for Black and brown individuals, and 28% for Latino children, are living in poverty. 34% of America, okay? But this is collateral damage. This comes from a society that believes that white is superior and that Black is inferior. If you believe that Black people don't deserve, Black and brown individuals don't deserve what white individuals deserve, then you will treat them in ways where, they can never get ahead. They can never provide for their families in ways that are sufficient for them. Now, I've just told you the poverty. I didn't tell you the low income, and I'm not going to tell you that it's not because I got to look it up. I was looking it up earlier for something else, but this doesn't include, I think, the number that was aside from poverty. So 34% was in poverty. I think it was 41% of Black children alone lived in low income housing. I think it was low income housing for them. So aside from 34% of Black children who live in poverty, you have 41% who live in low income housing. That's over 70% of Black and brown children who are either in poverty or low income housing. 70% in America, Black children who are living in poverty. That's called collateral damage. That's some serious damage that these communities are experiencing. Okay. So again, Black and brown children, they don't choose to come from parents who are Black and brown and who society has rejected, and who society won't pay sufficient amounts of money, who society never gave reparations to. Black and brown children doesn't choose to come from their homes. They're just born into these families, and then they are subjected to, the collateral damage of, being in poverty-stricken homes or in low-income spaces where they're just stuck at. That's called collateral damage. We didn't intend that, and yet that is what happens. So again, these Black and brown children, they have no control over how they got where they are. yet they suffer with the damages that white supremacy causes, that colonization causes, that a refusal of whiteness to dismantle itself. So whiteness has to say at some point, we're causing harm, like serious harm. And in 2021, it's so interesting how, whiteness wants to look at a situation that it's experiencing today. And yesterday, for example, in our city, we had a aggressive solicitation ordinance that was on the table. And the idea behind it was that, panhandlers in our downtown have become more prolific. There are more of them, rather, and we need to find them because they're asking for money in an aggressive way and scaring our patrons away. That's the solution to the cause of poverty. So the cause of poverty is whiteness being a capitalist. That's also part of their culture. This capitalist idea that everything has to be monetized. Everything has to be monetized. There is no let's take care of each other. We're in community. Let's be equitable and ensure that you have the needs that your needs met. It's let me get as much as I can for myself, and I'm not concerned about anybody else. That's whiteness. Okay, so whiteness creates this culture where we develop this poverty community, a large community of poverty-stricken individuals. And then when these individuals are asking for money because they can't get jobs, especially today, or they can get jobs and those jobs aren't sufficient. And so this is their other thing to do, is to go and try to find money in whatever way they can legally, which, panhandling is legal. When they do that, then whiteness says, you're in my way. You are, we don't like you here. We're going to fine you for, asking for money in a way that we don't want you to ask. So that's how whiteness responds to problems that it creates. It says, we're going to look at what's happening right this second, as opposed to saying, let's look at the root cause of this. Where did this come from? And how can we solve this in a way where we're not charging individuals who are asking for money, giving them charges? If you're asking for, in my mind, I'm just like, who in their right mind, who's well-resourced, would be asking for money? Like, as a general rule. Now, are there always exceptions to the rule? Yes, but exceptions to the rule let you know that that's not the rule, that's not the norm. So normally speaking, well-resourced people are not going to be asking for money. So what well-resourced person is going to be asking you for money? Because they don't need it. Who's doing that? But we will set a law. We'll say, well, because there are one or two people who don't need this money really, we're going to create a law to find them. But what about the 98% of people who actually do need money and who are getting fines? How are you going to find a person who needs money? And these are homeless people a lot of time. Where are you sending the bill to? But that's how whiteness responds to issues that it creates, as opposed to that root cause analysis and going to the roots and say, okay, how can I fix this from down here? Okay. Thank you all for joining another meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I actually have to rush away because I have another meeting soon, but it's necessary that we ground ourselves in understanding these behaviors and their impacts in order to continue the work of decolonizing our own minds, our own spaces, our own homes, our own actions and decision-making, so that we can, create this world that we actually all want to live in, a world that is, inclusive of all, a world that is diverse with actual diversity and not just physical diversity, a world that is equitable, a world that is answering the needs of each individual based on their personalized needs. I appreciate you joining me tonight. I look forward to talking to you all on next week. It has been awesome meeting with you tonight. I will talk to you later. Okay, bye.